Hello and welcome to the TC Exchange podcast. I'm Amity Kraus, ex-retail girl turned realtor turned business owner, where I teach new transaction coordinators how to navigate the complex real estate industry and coach experienced TCs how to level up their game and businesses to add even more value to their agents. Come along with me while I guide you through this intense, complicated, but always fun world of transaction coordination. Hello and welcome, my sweet friends, to the TC Exchange podcast. I am your host, Amity Kraus. I'm super excited for today's episode. Today, we are interviewing a good friend of mine, Elisabeth Hussey. We were introduced several years ago by an agent that was joining one of my real estate teams. And when I met Elisabeth, I was immediately impressed by her professionalism and her kindness. After working together, I recognize Elisabeth as a proactive problem solver, always one step ahead, making sure everything runs smoothly from contract to close. She's all about providing top-notch service to her agents so that they can focus on what they do best, selling homes. So let's get started. Hello, Elisabeth. Welcome to the show. I am so excited to introduce you today to our audience. Are you ready?
I am ready. I'm excited to do this with you.
Awesome. So let's start by telling us a little bit about yourself. Like, how did you get into the real estate industry? How long have you been a transaction coordinator?
So my name is Elisabeth. First off, I live in Carolina Beach, North Carolina. I got into the real estate industry about 7 years ago. So I started as a office administrator at a luxury real estate firm. Worked my way into a transaction coordinator within a year. And so I have been a transaction coordinator for 6 years. Yep, 6 years.
Yeah, that's awesome. What drew you to real estate originally?
So I don't know that this answer is the best one, but that's okay. What initially got me into real estate was I was actually working at a telecommunications provider, and I was in a call center environment. So one day I just decided that this was no longer for me. I had been in that call center for 5 to 6 years. It just was not for me. It was not a healthy work environment. And I said, I'm going to do something different. And so I quit without a backup plan. Not the smartest decision, but it happens, right? And so I was looking for jobs on Indeed, and I found one that was in the real estate industry as a real estate admin. Reading the description really, really enticed me. And so then I started doing more research on real estate and the different roles that you could do there. And I fell in love with it. And so then before even starting it, and so I started applying to jobs that were real estate focused, but I did get one as a real estate admin. So it was great.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
So you started at a brokerage, right?
I did.
What
Yeah.
did it look like for you transitioning from working as an admin to going into TC? What was that like?
So going from an admin to a TC kind of happened naturally. There was an agent in that office that was looking for a TC, and he did not want somebody that was necessarily super well versed in it. He was willing to train somebody how he wanted them to be. He was very particular. He's a great guy. I still communicate with him to this day. And he liked the way that I worked in the office. And so he was like, "You're super organized. I like how you do everything. Is there any chance that you'd be willing to allow me to train you to become a transaction coordinator for me and just kind of see where it goes?" So I was helping him while also helping the office, but it transformed into me helping more of the agents there. It was really fun.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
When you think about when you first started, what were some of the most memorable experiences that you had, or some of the challenges that kind of stick out from when you're first doing it, trying to figure it out?
Right. So for me, one of the biggest things that I remember is I did not know a ton about real estate whenever I had first started in the industry. The firm that I was at was not very big on
Mhm.
trainings and that kind of thing. And
Mhm.
so I spent a ton of time on my personal time studying the contract. So I would print it out, numerous copies, and I would write on it. I would read word for word, starting with the standard offer to purchase, and then I worked my way into the other disclosures that are required in North Carolina. It took a lot of time, and so I did not realize how it was a 13-page contract at the time. North Carolina now has a 17-page contract, but that still takes quite a bit of time, and so I spent a lot of time doing that, and I would also call the agent that I was working with and ask him questions. "This is what I see on the contract. Can you explain this to me? In what sense does this make sense?" And all that kind of thing, and so I spent a ton of time working, just to get the information. However, it was really rewarding to have an agent that was actually willing to talk me through that and that was willing to, be a complete open book. He would send me copies of the contracts that he had and would allow me to study those, even for the ones prior to me helping him as a TC. So, I was very lucky to have him,
Yeah.
very lucky.
Yeah, that's great. I think that's really key about a really key and wonderful way to learn how a contract works because eh, understanding the ins and outs of it really can help you get organized as a TC.
Absolutely.
And really, and I know you've experienced this in working in other states because you have this framework that you've understood from one contract. You can take a lot of that information and apply it to the next state, and that helps you become more flexible and valuable as you scale your business. That's awesome.
It definitely does. That's very
Yeah.
true.
Yeah, that's awesome. So
Yeah.
brokerage experience, what was it like at the brokerage that you're at? What was the culture like?
So the culture where I was at, it was the first brokerage I was at, it was not a very positive experience. Just it was not. It was a very negative one because the owner of the company, he was super involved, which sounds great. However, he also had a very negative attitude, and so it just kind of made things a little bit tense around there. And that's where I had started. That's where I had the agent that was talking me through everything. I ended up leaving that brokerage and going to another one where that culture was very much like training oriented, which was great, very much helpful, all of that kind of stuff. And I worked as a strictly as a TC for a team in that office. That one was definitely much better. I was at that brokerage for a few years before
Yeah.
transitioning out of that. And having the trainings that were available at that brokerage were one of the best things that I could have had to gain that experience.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think that the strategy that you've had where you as a beginner working for a team as a TC and taking advantage of the opportunities to learn from some of what the agents are doing and the classes that the agents are attending if they have a good team
Right.
structure, that's really great to help you grow. Awesome.
Thank you.
So, what was the moment when you realized that you wanted to go independent and you could go independent and be a individual independent TC?
Absolutely. So, great question. I actually had left being a transaction coordinator just for a little bit. My story is not necessarily very conventional. I had actually moved from North Carolina to Utah. And in doing that, I worked for the same brokerage company that I had worked for in North Carolina. However, I did a different role. I moved into a director of agent services role,
Mhm.
which was amazing. However, in that role, I wasn't very fulfilled in helping people the way that I wanted to. I was helping them, but not in the same way that a transaction coordinator does. And I did not realize that I had fell in love with being a transaction coordinator
Mhm.
until I was out of it. One day I was driving home from work, and one of the agents that I still work with today, Joe, he called me and he said, "I'm joining a team and this is only going to work if you will be my transaction coordinator, but I know that you don't do that." And I said, "Okay, let me think about it." So I took a little bit to think about it,
Mhm.
but it really excited me. When I got the call from him, it excited me because I knew that I was missing it. So I was like, this is perfect. But I didn't want to tell him that right away. Don't tell him I said that. Um, so
No one
I
was
had
there.
to, no one at all. So I did not want to tell him that, but I called him back the next day and I said, I would absolutely love this. And so I started as being his TC, but still working in my director of agent services role. So going both ways. Then I was connected with y'all and his team. And so it expanded. It just kind of naturally happened. And as I started having more and more clients, I said, I can do this. I can actually do this for myself. And I don't need the W-2 backup job as, so as a blanket security essentially. So I said, I'm doing it. And so I left. It took about, I think, 8 months of doing both roles before I transitioned into doing solely independent. But it's been the best decision I've ever made.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. It's so empowering. I remember when I first started, it was very similar in that I was a director of operations for one team and then became
Yeah,
a TC for another one, just sort of on the side independently.
right.
And you just have to grind and do, two jobs at the same
You
time. It
do.
wasn't like it was 40 hours in this half of the week and 40 hours on this half of the week. It was like 80 hours right on top of each
Right.
other.
Right.
but
Yeah.
but it was worth it. So worth it in the end. So
Very
awesome.
worth it. It
Yeah.
gets you where you want to be.
Yeah.
So you have to put in a lot of hard work, but it's worth it.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. So how did you go about setting up your business? Like any tips for some of our listeners that are on the same path or could be on the same path?
Absolutely. That's a great question. I spent a lot of time while working both roles getting my system set up. I knew the systems that I needed as a transaction coordinator because I had done it before. And so I spent months getting everything into my system. Once I had gotten that first phone call from Joe, I immediately started the systems that weekend. I got a LLC set up. I got everything plugged in and perfected because I knew that he wasn't going to get a contract right away. So I knew it was going to take a little bit of time. So
Mhm.
it gave me time to actually get in my email templates. A lot of what we do is via email, and a lot of that is templates that we use. And they do differ state to state, but I spent a lot of time getting those into my system, getting those perfected the way that I wanted them to, still tweaking them. They're always a work in progress, but
Yep.
um, I spent a lot of time just digging into my system. So I spent a lot of time having 80-hour plus work weeks. But I also had to do, knowing that I was eventually going to pursue this full time, I had to do a lot of digging into stuff that I had not done before. So, as being a business owner, knowing what softwares to use for the financial aspect of it, for bookkeeping and all of that, I never had any of that experience. So, I had to spend a lot of time digging into that side of it as well. So, I had to perfect my systems for real estate as well as for my business. So,
Wow.
it was fun.
Yeah. I think
Fun.
that's one of the hardest transitions. I think that going from working at a brokerage or working on a small team where you're a W-2 to
Yeah.
being a 1099, your mentality has to shift and change into be like, okay, now I'm a business owner and now I've got, people that are relying on me even more. I'm not the one who's relying on them so much. They're relying
Exactly.
on me now because there's that relationship is different and I'm growing something here. That's awesome.
And it's huge to have those relationships with agents, and in everything we do, it's all about relationships. If you
Mhm.
don't have the great relationships with the agents, which starts with your systems, then this is not going to be very successful for not only us, but for them as well. We're working for them. And so we have to make sure that all of that is set up properly. So
Yeah.
it's fun.
Yeah, absolutely. So how would you say that your day-to-day life has changed since you became independent?
I love that question. It's changed a lot. So I have the task. I do all of my real estate based tasks out of my system first thing in the morning. I do my emails, my task. I get those knocked out. If we got new contracts that came in, I put all of those in, get all of that rolling. However, I then spend the middle and end of my day doing more things as far as checking in with my agents. Again, it's all about relationships. And so I have 2 days a week that I spend just checking in on agents and seeing how are they doing, what can I do to better assist. And it may seem excessive to do it 2 times a week, but I've had situations where I haven't done it as consistently and the ball gets dropped or something gets missed. So the more that I check in, the more it's going to be top of mind for them to be looking out for anything that can be improved. So I do that. I also have designated days where I do specifically bookkeeping. I don't hire that part of it out. So I've got a specific day of the week that I just go through the financial aspect of it and getting everything situated. But I also have a portion of my day where I prospect for new agents. And so in some of my check in calls with my agents, not everyone, but on some of them, I do, ask if they have any real estate agent friends that are needing help or anything like that, anybody that they recommend that I should reach out to.
Mm.
I've never in my life considered myself a salesperson, but being a business owner, that's had to change just a little bit. So that's been really fun. So I do spend part of my day prospecting. If they give me names or anything like that, I'll reach out to them because my business has grown entirely off of word of mouth, which has been incredible.
Mm.
So I don't want to ever forget that and forget it's all relationship based and
Yeah.
who you know. So
Yeah, I love that. And you're absolutely right. It is about the relationship. And one of the things that I always talk about with our team is about how we're not an assistant, we're a partner. And
absolutely.
unless we are checking in and developing a relationship and saying, this is what I'm doing, and this is how I'm a partner to you, this is how I'm showing up for you, that's that if you're not doing that, that's the moments where you forget to get looped in on information on the deal, and you're like, oh, closing was pushed 2 weeks, neat, I didn't know, like all of
Right.
those kind of things. That communication and maintaining the relationship is so important. So I love that you do that. That's
Yeah,
great.
it definitely is because it's very easy in our role to become kind of a background figure. I hate to put it that way, but it is very easy to become a background figure if you're not doing those check-ins.
Mhm.
So very crucial, very
Yeah.
crucial.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that you put really strong systems in place so that you could automate a lot of that back end task and then give
Yeah,
yourself the space to develop the relationships with your agents and create new opportunities for your business by doing that. That's brilliant. Brilliant.
absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So tell me, what are some of your favorite tools and systems that you use in your business?
So a current system that I'm actually using for my day-to-day tasks is a system that's called A-Frame. I used to use another one. However, I heard about A-Frame probably 6 to 7 months ago. So I started digging into it and it has everything in it that I need. So it has where you can email template, you can put in clients like potential agents that you want to work with and have a prospecting schedule on that, reminders to check in. You've got date driven tasks that are in that system. And I can also store all of my documents for each file individually, all in the same system. I used to have a few different systems that I would use for all of those different things. Now I just use A-Frame, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
And for my bookkeeping, I use FreshBooks. So I have to send out invoices. I have a specific day of the week that I do that as well. Everything is systematized in a way with me. And so I use FreshBooks to send out those invoices and to also do all of my bookkeeping. So those are my biggest platforms.
Yeah, awesome. I haven't used A-Frame myself, but I have heard some really great things about it, and I'm glad to hear another good review.
Yeah,
So,
it's incredible. I switched over to it 6 to 8 months ago,
yeah.
and I have not looked back since. I will definitely let you dig into mine if you want to.
Yeah. Thank you. Oh, all right. So, what's next for you and your business? Like, any exciting projects or things happening on the horizon?
Yeah, actually, I love that question too. I'm working on expanding into another state. So currently, I am in North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Utah, and I am expanding into Arkansas. I have
Nice.
a really good friend that lives there, and she's had some real estate friends that, ironically enough, have asked if she knew anybody that was a transaction coordinator. has gotten me connected. And so I've gone through over the past few weeks studying that like their contract.
Mhm.
Very different, if you're wondering, from the
Yeah.
other states that I work in. So I've gone through studying that, and within the next week, I will be fully launched there. So super excited about that.
Yeah.
Um, I've had a lot of life changes happen in my life recently, and so my big priority focus for the end of this year and going into next year is expanding and growing my business. So I'm making it a priority to sit down with agents in town and actually do coffee dates with them, get face to face, because that's the best way to get to know them. And we get to choose, thankfully, who we work with, being independent. So I do the coffee dates and see if it would be a good relationship to have.
Yeah.
So
Awesome. I love it. Congratulations. That's great.
thank you.
That's
I'm
great
excited.
news. That's
Mm,
great
thank
news.
you.
Well, what advice do you have for a TC that's considering moving to independent from being working at a brokerage? What would you tell them?
I'm going to say the first part is probably going to be a little contradicting, but it makes sense in my head. Take your time, but also take the leap. So when I say take your time, like actually take your time to fully understand the contracts before doing it. You need to be the expert in the field before you go fully independent, in my opinion, because you have to have the agents trust you, and you do that by becoming an expert. So take your time getting to know that stuff. Take your time getting your systems set up. You don't want to be fumbling with your systems while you've got 20 contracts running.
Mhm.
Doesn't work very well for anybody, but also do it. If you're thinking about going independent, it's already on your mind. You've already likely weighed out the pros and the cons. Just do it. So get your systems and everything set up. If you have to do, like a second job on the backside to support it in the beginning, do it.
That's great
Do it.
advice. That's great
Yeah.
advice.
Thank
All
you.
right. Well, I have one last question.
Okay.
What book have you read that impacted you both with your personal life and your professional life?
The Gap in the Gain. So I believe it's by Dan Sullivan.
Mhm.
I love that book. So it's a mindset book, and it goes over you can either stay in the gap or the gain, and kind of shifting that mindset. And it helped me a lot because the focus of it is looking back at where you have come from and seeing the progress that you've made, instead of saying, like, for example, once my business reaches 25 agents, I will feel successful. That is going to give you something that can be really heavy and then make it really difficult for you to grow, because the mindset is always going to be, I'm not there yet. Because once you hit 25 agents, you're going to have a bigger goal, which is great. We want goals, right? However, if you're never looking at and patting yourself on the back for where you've come from, it can just leave you in a really negative space. So instead of saying, once I get 25 agents, I'll be happy, you can start with, I went from having a W 2 to doing this on the side, but now I'm fully independent. That is amazing. Way to go. And so it's all about shifting your mindset. And instead of, looking after stuff that might put you in a negative space, give yourself a pat on the back. Like, you've done this, you've gotten here. And that's helped me tremendously just with my mindset, which helps in every aspect of life.
Yeah, I love it. I love that.
Yeah.
It's wonderful. I
Yeah.
am so glad that Joe introduced us years ago, and
Yes.
I am so glad to work with you. And thank you so much for coming on and joining us today. This was a ton of
Absolutely.
fun, and I
Yes.
was excited to hear some parts of your story that I didn't know.
Yes.
And I'm so excited for you in your future. Before I let you go, if we have any listeners that wanted to reach out to you, where could they find you?
You can find me. Best way is going to be via email. My email is E as in Elizabeth, H as in Huzzy, that's my last name, at timeawaytc.com. So if you have any questions, that's the absolute best way.
Love it. Love it. Awesome.
Awesome.
Thank you so much,
Thank you so
Elizabeth.
much.
It was great talking to you.
You too.
And that wraps up another episode of the TC Exchange podcast. Thank you so much for joining me and being a part of this incredible journey through the world of transaction coordination. Remember, every challenge is an opportunity to learn, and together, we're setting the compass to true north. If you want to dive deeper into the world of TCs or simply connect with our growing community, follow us on Instagram at TrueNorthTCT. For exclusive content, insights, and engaging discussions, be sure to join our Facebook group, the TC Exchange. And for resources, courses, and a treasure trove of knowledge, check out our website at TrueNorthTransactionServices.com. Keep the conversations going, share your insights, and until next time, keep your compass pointing true north. See you soon.